What happens when a political figure steps onto a battlefield they're woefully unprepared for? Representative Jasmine Crockett thought she had found the perfect opportunity to score political points against White House Deputy Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt during a heated Congressional Committee hearing. Little did she know that she was walking into a legal trap that would leave her reputation in tatters. The Congressional Oversight Committee room buzzed with tension as the morning hearing on government transparency was about to begin. The wood-paneled walls seemed to close in as journalists positioned their cameras, hoping to capture something newsworthy. Representative Jasmine Crockett arrived late, making a show of her entrance, her high heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She took her seat at the raised committee panel, arranging her papers with dramatic flair. "I apologize for my tardiness," Crockett announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Some of us were up all night actually reading the documents that were dumped on us at the last minute." Karoline Leavitt sat calmly at the witness table below, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, a stack of folders and legal pads arranged precisely in front of her. She wore a simple navy blue suit and maintained a professional demeanor despite Crockett's obvious attempt at provocation. The contrast between them was striking. Crockett's theatrical demeanor versus Leavitt's composed presence. "Ms. Leavitt," Committee Chairman Johnson began, "thank you for appearing today to discuss the administration's communications regarding the Border Security Act. We'll begin with questions from the committee members." Several representatives took their turns, asking routine questions that Leavitt answered with practiced ease. But everyone in the room could sense that Crockett was practically vibrating with eagerness for her turn. When it finally came, she didn't waste a moment. "Ms. Leavitt," Crockett began, her voice dripping with condescension, "I find it interesting that you've come before this committee claiming transparency when your office has consistently stonewalled legitimate congressional oversight. Let's get right to it. Did you or did you not deliberately withhold documents requested by this committee regarding the Border Security Act negotiations?" Leavitt leaned slightly forward into her microphone. "Representative Crockett, I appreciate your question. Our office has fully complied with all document requests within the legal timeframe established by—" "Please answer the question directly," Crockett interrupted. "A simple yes or no will suffice." "With respect, Congresswoman, I cannot answer with a simple yes or no because your premise is factually incorrect," Leavitt replied, her voice steady but firm. "Our office submitted over 3,000 pages of documentation to this committee on the exact date specified in your subpoena." Crockett's eyes narrowed. "Those documents were heavily redacted to the point of uselessness. You're playing games with this committee, Ms. Leavitt. The redactions were made in accordance with executive privilege guidelines established under both the current and previous administrations," Leavitt responded, pulling a document from her folder. "In fact, I have here the official guidelines, which were codified during your party's administration, establishing the exact protocols we followed." The committee room fell silent as Leavitt calmly read from the document, citing specific legal precedents and case law. Crockett shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly unprepared for such a thorough legal response. "That may be," Crockett persisted, raising her voice, "but we both know those guidelines are being abused to hide information that would embarrass your boss." Leavitt didn't take the bait. "Representative, I've provided the committee with the legal basis for each redaction in the documentation package. If you'll refer to Appendix C in the materials my office provided last week, you'll find a comprehensive index of each redacted item and the specific legal statute supporting that redaction." Crockett's face flushed as she frantically shuffled through her papers, clearly unaware of this appendix. The room remained uncomfortably quiet as she searched. "I don't seem to have that document," she finally said. "I have an extra copy right here," Leavitt offered, signaling to an aide who promptly delivered the document to Crockett. "Page 42 specifically addresses the concerns you've raised about the border security communications." The trap had been set, and Crockett had walked right into it. As she flipped through the pages, her expression revealed that she had been caught completely unprepared. Crockett cleared her throat, attempting to regain her composure as she skimmed through the document Leavitt had provided. The room remained silent except for the occasional camera click capturing her obvious discomfort. "While I appreciate this information, Ms. Leavitt," Crockett finally said, "this doesn't address the fact that key communications between your office and Homeland Security were completely absent from your submission." Leavitt nodded, as if she had anticipated this exact challenge. "I'm glad you brought that up, Representative. If you'll turn to page 87 of that same document, you'll find a detailed explanation of the interdepartmental communication protocols. Communications between the press office and Homeland Security fall under separate disclosure requirements as established in United States v. Morrison, 2018, which specifically addressed interagency, deliberative process protections." Crockett's frustration became increasingly visible. She had clearly come prepared to embarrass Leavitt, but found herself consistently outmaneuvered by the younger woman's meticulous legal knowledge. "Let's move on," Crockett said sharply. "Your office claimed that certain communications were protected under national security exemptions. Are you seriously suggesting that press talking points about border policy constitute a national security matter?" A slight smile crossed Leavitt's face. "That's an excellent question, Representative. The documents in question weren't merely talking points. They contained specific details about Border Patrol deployment strategies and interdiction tactics. I've prepared a brief for the committee." She produced another document from her folder, citing 14 federal court cases establishing the precedent that operational details of border security measures do indeed qualify for national security protection. She handed copies to the committee members. "You'll notice that 8 of these cases were decided during the previous administration, with identical protections being upheld by the courts." Chairman Johnson leaned forward. "Ms. Leavitt, are you suggesting that Representative Crockett's characterization of these documents is incorrect?" "I wouldn't presume to speak to the representative's intent," Leavitt replied diplomatically. "I can only address the legal classification of the documents themselves. The talking points Representative Crockett referenced were actually operational briefing materials containing sensitive deployment information. This distinction is critical. From a legal standpoint," Crockett slammed her hand on the table, "this is absurd. You're hiding behind legal technicalities to obstruct legitimate oversight." "Point of order, Mr. Chairman," called another committee member. "The witness should be allowed to answer without interruption." "Sustained," Johnson replied. "Representative Crockett, please allow the witness to complete her responses." Crockett's nostrils flared. "Ms. Leavitt, let's be honest here. Your office has consistently used legal loopholes to avoid transparency. The American people deserve better than these games." Leavitt remained unruffled. "I understand your frustration, Representative, but I must respectfully disagree with your characterization. These aren't loopholes. They're established legal principles that have protected the functioning of government across multiple administrations of both parties. In fact, I'm not interested in a lecture on constitutional law from someone who's barely been out of college long enough to know how government actually works," Crockett snapped. A murmur rippled through the room at the personal attack. Leavitt paused, took a sip of water, and responded with measured calm. "Representative, I graduated cum laude from Harvard Law and served as a clerk for Justice Alito before entering public service. I'm happy to discuss my qualifications if that would be helpful to the committee, but I believe our focus today should remain on the substantive legal questions regarding document disclosure." Several committee members exchanged impressed glances. Crockett, realizing her mistake, attempted to pivot. "Your credentials aren't the issue here. The issue is the systematic obstruction your office has engaged in. Let's talk about the missing emails between your office and the Border Patrol union representatives." "I'm pleased you brought that up," Leavitt replied, pulling yet another document from her seemingly endless supply of prepared materials. Those communications were actually submitted to this committee 3 weeks ago. I have the committee's signed receipt right here, along with the tracking number for the digital submission." She slid the receipt across the table toward the chairman. "You'll note that the submission occurred 48 hours before the deadline established in your subpoena." Crockett looked stunned. "I never received those emails." "That's concerning," Leavitt said with what appeared to be genuine worry. "According to our records, they were delivered to all committee members via the secure server as required by House rules. Perhaps your staff could check your secure document portal?" The submission included 418 pages of unredacted emails between our office and the Border Patrol representatives discussing public messaging coordination. The chairman examined the receipt. "The committee staff will verify this submission immediately." A staff member hurried over, whispered something in the chairman's ear, and handed him a folder. After reviewing it briefly, he looked up. "It appears the documents Ms. Leavitt referenced were indeed submitted to the committee as stated and are available in our secure system." Crockett's face had turned an alarming shade of red. She had clearly been caught unprepared again, having failed to review documents that had been properly submitted. "Ms. Leavitt," she pressed on desperately, "regardless of these submissions, your office has created a culture of secrecy that undermines—" "I apologize for interrupting, Representative," Leavitt said politely, "but could you provide specific examples of this alleged culture of secrecy? Our office has responded to 157 congressional inquiries this year alone, with an average response time of 9.3 days, significantly faster than the 14-day requirement under House rules." Crockett was visibly floundering now, her planned line of attack dissolving before the eyes of everyone in the room and the cameras capturing every moment of her discomfort. "This isn't about response times," Crockett retorted, struggling to regain control of the narrative. "It's about the substance of those responses. Your office routinely provides answers that say nothing while appearing cooperative." Leavitt nodded, thoughtfully. "I appreciate that concern. Perhaps we could look at a specific example that you feel demonstrates this pattern. That would help me address your concerns more effectively." The challenge in Leavitt's voice was subtle, but unmistakable. She was inviting Crockett to provide evidence that Leavitt seemed confident would not exist, or that she was already prepared to counter. Crockett shuffled through her notes again, looking increasingly desperate. "Let's talk about the Johnson memo," she finally said, referring to an internal document that had been leaked to the press the previous month. A murmur rippled through the room. The Johnson memo had caused a minor media sensation when portions of it were published, appearing to show the administration considering controversial border policies. "The Johnson memo was never officially requested by this committee," Leavitt replied calmly. "However, when portions were leaked to the press, our office proactively submitted the complete document to Congressional Oversight to ensure you had the full context rather than selective excerpts." She produced yet another folder. This submission occurred on April 12th, along with a legal analysis explaining why the selective leaking of this document potentially violated federal law. I have copies of both the complete memo and our legal analysis, if the committee would find that helpful. Chairman Johnson held up his hand. "We have those documents on file, Ms. Leavitt." "Thank you." Crockett's eyes widened slightly. She had clearly been unaware that the complete memo had already been submitted. "The memo itself isn't the issue," she pivoted again. "It's the fact that your office denied its existence initially when reporters inquired about it." Leavitt smiled apologetically. "I'm afraid that's not accurate, Representative. What our office said was that we couldn't comment on alleged leaked documents without seeing them. Once we confirmed the authenticity of the leaked portions, we immediately acknowledged the document and, as I mentioned, proactively submitted the complete version to Congress." She pulled out a transcript. "This is the exact statement from our office to the press. We cannot comment on alleged documents without reviewing them. If these purported excerpts prove authentic, we will address them transparently." Within 4 hours of that statement, we had verified the leak and submitted the complete document to Congress. Crockett was clearly unprepared for this level of detailed rebuttal. Her planned line of questioning had assumed that Leavitt would be defensive or evasive. Instead, the young press secretary was methodically dismantling each accusation with documentary evidence and precise legal citations. "Representative Crockett," Chairman Johnson interjected, "you have 2 minutes remaining in your questioning period." Crockett straightened her shoulders, attempting to salvage something from this exchange. "Ms. Leavitt, let's cut to the chase. Your office has deliberately slow-walked documents related to the San Miguel border incident, where agents were accused of using excessive force." For the first time, Leavitt's composed expression faltered slightly. "Representative, I must correct that characterization. The San Miguel incident is currently under active investigation by both the Department of Justice and Homeland Security's Inspector General. As I'm sure you're aware, documents relating to ongoing investigations have special handling requirements under federal law." "That's convenient," Crockett scoffed. "Hide behind an ongoing investigation whenever the truth might be politically damaging." Leavitt leaned forward. "With respect, Representative, the investigation was initiated at the request of members of your own party, including yourself. I have here your letter dated February 18th, specifically requesting this investigation and acknowledging the document restrictions that would result." She slid a copy of the letter toward Crockett. "Your letter states, and I quote, 'We acknowledge that this formal investigation request will necessarily limit document production during the investigative period, as required by federal law.'" The room fell completely silent. Several committee members turned to look at Crockett, whose mouth opened and closed without producing words. "Furthermore," Leavitt continued relentlessly, "when the investigation concludes, all documents will be made available as required by law. Our office has already prepared the document packages for release the moment we receive clearance from DOJ and the Inspector General. We anticipated this would be a concern for the committee and have dedicated 3 staff members to ensuring these documents are processed as quickly as legally permissible." Crockett finally found her voice. "The investigation has gone on far longer than necessary. It's a stalling tactic. The timeline for the investigation is determined by the Inspector General's office, which operates independently from the White House," Leavitt responded. "I cannot and would not attempt to influence their process. However, I can tell you that our office has responded to every document request from investigators within 24 hours, well above the standard requirement." Chairman Johnson interjected, "Representative Crockett, your time has expired." "I need to follow up on this point," Crockett insisted. "You've exceeded your allotted time," the chairman replied firmly. "Other members are waiting for their turn to question the witness." Crockett sat back, visibly fuming as the questioning moved to the next committee member, who began by complimenting Leavitt on her thorough preparation. During the next hour, other representatives took their turns questioning Leavitt. Some were hostile, others supportive, but none managed to catch her unprepared. She answered each question with the same meticulous attention to detail, citing relevant laws, court cases, and precedents. Occasionally she glanced toward Crockett, who was furiously scribbling notes, clearly planning another attack when she could secure additional questioning time. When the chairman announced a 15-minute recess, Crockett immediately approached Leavitt as she gathered her materials. "This isn't over," Crockett said quietly, her voice tense. "You may think you've won this round with your legal parlor tricks, but the American people see through this charade." Leavitt looked up calmly. "Representative, I came here today with one purpose: to provide this committee with accurate information about our document production process. I'm happy to continue that discussion when the hearing resumes." As the committee reconvened after the short recess, the atmosphere in the room had noticeably shifted. Other members, having witnessed Crockett's earlier defeat, approached their questioning with more caution. Leavitt continued responding with precision and calm, never rising to provocations or showing frustration, even when questions became repetitive or accusatory. Near the end of the session, Chairman Johnson announced, "We'll now have a final round of follow-up questions, beginning with Representative Crockett." Crockett had spent the recess huddled with her staff, clearly preparing for this moment. She approached the microphone with renewed confidence. "Ms. Leavitt," she began, "you've presented yourself as a paragon of transparency today, but I've just received information that contradicts your testimony." She held up a document dramatically. "This internal email shows that your office specifically instructed officials to delay responses to this committee's inquiries." Whispers spread through the room as Leavitt accepted a copy of the email. She studied it carefully, her expression unchanged. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Representative," Leavitt said after a moment. "This appears to be an email from Jason Winters, who briefly worked in our correspondence division last year. However, there's an important context missing. Here." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "This is the complete email chain, which shows that Mr. Winters was immediately corrected by his supervisor." She handed copies to the committee members. "If you'll note the timestamp, his email was sent at 2:14 p.m., and his supervisor's correction was sent at 2:23 p.m., 9 minutes later, explicitly stating that Mr. Winters' direction was completely contrary to office policy and instructing the team to prioritize congressional inquiries as our highest response category." Leavitt continued, "Mr. Winters was a junior staff member who misunderstood protocol. He was counseled and reassigned to non-correspondence duties the same day. All recipients of his incorrect guidance were immediately instructed to disregard it." Crockett blinked, clearly unprepared for this response. "How convenient that you happen to have the complete email chain readily available." "Not convenience, Representative. Preparation," Leavitt replied. "When I was invited to testify before this committee, I conducted a thorough review of all correspondence-related incidents over the past year to ensure I could provide accurate information. This incident was flagged in our internal review, and I anticipated it might come up today." Crockett shifted tactics again. "Let's talk about the timing of your document productions. They consistently arrive just minutes before deadlines, making it difficult for this committee to properly review them." Leavitt nodded thoughtfully. "That's a fair concern. Document production involves multiple departments and security reviews, which can create bottlenecks. After hearing similar feedback from other congressional offices, we implemented a new protocol last month to target delivery at least 48 hours before deadlines." She produced a graph showing recent delivery times. "As you can see, our average delivery time has moved from 0.8 days before deadline to 2.3 days before deadline in the past month. We're continuing to improve this process and welcome the committee's feedback." Crockett was becoming visibly frustrated. Each attack she launched was met with documented evidence and reasonable explanations. "Ms. Leavitt, the American people aren't interested in your charts and graphs. They want to know why this administration hides the truth about what's happening at our border." "I respectfully disagree with the premise of your statement," Leavitt responded. "This administration has released more border-related data and documentation than any previous administration. I've provided the committee with comparative statistics on document production going back 3 administrations." She pointed to another chart in the materials she had distributed. "Border apprehension data, processing statistics, and facility conditions are now published weekly rather than quarterly. Court records show that FOIA request response times for border-related matters have decreased by 62% under current policies." Crockett leaned forward. "If you're so committed to transparency, why did your office refuse my request to visit border facilities last month?" Leavitt didn't hesitate. "Your request wasn't refused, Representative. It was scheduled according to the same protocol applied to all congressional visits. I have here your original request dated April 3rd asking for a visit within the next 2 weeks. Our office responded on April 5th, explaining that the facilities you requested were fully booked with previously scheduled congressional delegations and offered alternative dates in May. She produced the correspondence. We received no response to our suggested alternative dates. The offer remains open, and we would be happy to facilitate your visit at your convenience. Crockett appeared, momentarily speechless. She had clearly expected Leavitt to be defensive or to struggle with this line of questioning, but the press secretary seemed to have anticipated every possible attack. "My final question," Crockett said, her voice tight with suppressed anger, "concerns your office's alleged interference with whistleblowers who have tried to come forward about border conditions." For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across Leavitt's face. Not guilt, but what appeared to be righteous indignation quickly controlled. "Representative Crockett, whistleblower protection is something I take extremely seriously," Leavitt said, her voice carrying a new intensity. "Not only is it the law, but it's essential for good governance. I categorically reject any suggestion that our office has interfered with whistleblowers." She pulled out a final document. "This is a directive I personally issued to all staff on my first day, explicitly prohibiting any action that could be perceived as whistleblower intimidation, and establishing a direct channel to the Inspector General for any staff member with concerns." Looking Crockett directly in the eyes, she continued, "If you have specific allegations of whistleblower interference, I urge you to share them immediately, not just with this committee, but with the appropriate authorities. Such behavior would be grounds for immediate termination in our office and potential criminal charges." The sincerity in Leavitt's voice was unmistakable, and even Crockett seemed taken aback by the forceful response. "I have no further questions," Crockett finally said, surrendering her remaining time. As the hearing concluded, journalists rushed from the room to file their stories. The narrative was clear. What was supposed to be a gotcha moment for Representative Crockett had become a showcase for Karoline Leavitt's extraordinary legal knowledge and meticulous preparation. In the hallway outside, Leavitt was surrounded by reporters asking for comments. She responded with characteristic professionalism, refusing to criticize Crockett directly. "Today's hearing was an important opportunity to clarify our document production processes," she told the press. "Congressional oversight is essential to our democracy, and our office remains committed to transparency within the appropriate legal frameworks." Meanwhile, Crockett hurried away, ignoring reporters' questions and surrounded by grim-faced staffers. One journalist overheard her muttering, "How was she prepared for literally everything? It's like she knew exactly what I was going to ask." What she didn't know was that Leavitt had spent weeks preparing for this hearing, anticipating every possible line of attack, researching every document request, and studying relevant case law. While Crockett had sought a quick political victory, Leavitt had approached the hearing as the serious legal matter it was. By evening, video clips of the exchange were trending online, with commentators from across the political spectrum acknowledging Leavitt's impressive command of the facts. Legal experts appeared on news programs analyzing her precise citations of case law and regulatory frameworks. The consensus was clear. Jasmine Crockett had challenged the wrong opponent, underestimating both Karoline Leavitt's legal expertise and her thorough preparation. What was meant to be Crockett's moment of triumph had instead become a masterclass in how government officials should approach congressional testimony, with facts, documentation, and an unwavering commitment to accuracy over political posturing. In Washington, where perception often matters more than reality, this was a decisive victory not just for Leavitt personally, but for the principle that substance should triumph over political theater.